Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Hello, folks joining in, seeing the attendees roll in. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you're already here with us as we wait just a couple of moments for other folks to chime in. Yeah, introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your connection to FRN, where you're calling in from. We'll get started in just a few minutes as folks join in. Oh, I'm seeing some things in the Q&A that the chat is disabled. Kimmy, would you mind helping with that? Thanks for letting us know, folks. We'll get that set up in just a minute. But hello to the folks joining in again. Really looking forward to our time here today. Great. Okay, I believe I might have turned it on for folks to turn on the chat if someone wants to. Great. Thanks, Susan. It works. Amazing. Yay. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Yeah, we'll get started in just a few minutes, like I said. In the meantime, introduce yourself in the chat. Should be on and working now. Let us know where you're calling in from, your connection to FRN. Starting to see some chats come through. Hello, David. Thanks so much for joining us. Hi, Fran from NAU. I believe if you joined us for the Super Bowl, probably Regina might know you, Fran, from our NAU chapter. Awesome. Nice to have you here. We have Jennifer from Westchester, Pennsylvania. That's where Kimmy on the call is living and from with her chapter, which is really cool. Vivian from Merrimack College. We have some folks from Denver, other folks from NAU, Utah. Amazing. Yeah. Hi, Kelsey. Nice to have you on the call here today. Kelsey was formerly from the Rowan University, I believe, current SOM member and our beautiful graphic designer. Hi, Bernita. Awesome. Seeing so many great folks in the chat here. Hi, Allie from Kroger. Hello. Amazing. So many folks from all over. And I see some folks that will have to hop off early, which is no problem at all. We'll make sure you get the recording and all the good stuff after the call. Hi, Tina, our board president. Glad to have you here as well. Amazing. We'll keep it rolling in the chat. We'll get started here, but definitely feel free to keep introducing yourself and engaging in the chat. A big part of these conversations are just talking back and forth with our audience here. Want to hear your feedback and your in the moment reactions to things. Feel free to put like emojis, yays, questions, comments. Kimmy on the call with us here will help us be able to sort through all the questions. We'll make sure to get your answers. Also, like I mentioned, we'll be recording this conversation and making sure that you get a link to the recording as well as a recap blog post after this conversation. And yeah, you can put your questions in the chat, or there's also a Q&A function through Zoom as well. So I will get started here. Welcome everyone to the Roundtable Talk here today. If you haven't attended before, we're going to launch a poll in just a couple minutes to see who's on the call with us here today. But if you haven't joined us before, these conversations are an opportunity for us here at Food Recovery Network to share our learnings, share our data, and hear from you all, our nationwide network of partners. And so as we're looking back at the first half of our program year, which started in July, we'll be reflecting on the data and the key learnings that we've had so far, in addition to looking ahead through June, our plans and beyond from there for our work ahead. On the call here, we have Regina, our Executive Director, and Katie Jones on the call, our Chief Operating Officer. So Regina and Katie, if you want to share a couple of just welcoming remarks.
So thankful to see everyone. Thank you for your time and for being with us in community. I'm excited about the conversation today.
Same, delighted to be with you all. Looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. And we also have Kimmy on the call here today, who's off camera at the moment, but she's a FRN staff member. She's here to help with technical support and everything like that. So Kimmy is also on our call. So to dive in before we get started, I know there's a few funders on the call and other folks. We just want to shout out to our great partners that fund our work, in addition to, of course, all of the amazing students and hunger fighting nonprofits and all the different folks within our network that makes our work possible here. To orient some folks to the roundtable talk, I wanted to first share some goals of our time here together, and then curious to see who was on the call here today. So we're going to launch a poll in just a minute. But to introduce folks to the goals of our time here, like I said, these conversations are an opportunity to have us here at Food Recovery Network share more about our data, share more about our learnings, and really just being transparent and in the moment feedback and understanding of what is going on in our worlds and hearing what's going on in all of your worlds as it intersects with our work in food recovery. So we're really looking to build that feedback loop and build relationships with you all, with our students, with our stakeholders on the conversation here today. So Kimmy, if you can launch our poll, I'm curious to see who is on the call here today. Just a minute. Beautiful. Thank you, Kimmy. Folks should see that on their screens now. Yeah, just pick one. How would you describe your relationship with FRN within these categories? Community supporter, a food business, doing food recovery, student alumni, higher ed, or hunger fighting? I'm seeing lots of responses coming in. Give it just a couple seconds. All right, if you want to go ahead and end it, Kimmy, and share the results. Great. Yeah, definitely a really great spread. It's really fun for us to see. I know we can't physically see the folks on the call, but again, keep engaged through the chat, but it's fun for us to be able to see the folks on the conversation. So it's looking like a really nice spread for here today. Kimmy, can you also please launch the poll? We're curious if folks have attended a roundtable talk here with us before or not. Great, it should be up for everyone. Seeing some answers coming in. All right, you can go ahead and end it, Kimmy. And share. Beautiful. All right, yeah. I think this is what last time we saw as well, a lot of new folks to the call. So yeah, really excited to welcome you all and re-welcome the folks that have joined us before and continuing the conversation. Definitely excited to dig in with you all. We have a lot of content today, a lot of brain power type energy of just downloading the data and the learning. So really looking forward to the conversation and engaging you all. I know there was a number of students on our call here today, so I wanted to, first of all, shout out to you all and your great work of recovering food across the US. We are continually impressed by the work that you do every single day to move this movement forward. We also wanted to share this opportunity, if you might have seen on our social media or via email from our program team. We're running a bingo card game where you can expand your opportunities at your chapter of engaging in different areas of food recovery, maybe something that you haven't considered before, and earn prize money and money back to supporting your chapter. So yeah, I see Kimmy just sent the details in the chat. So if you're interested, if you're a chapter advisor or a student on the call, check that out. Definitely want to be able to support your programs continually, and also just curious to see what comes out of this time. And this is running through the end of March. So with that, I will turn it over to Regina to get us officially started with some acknowledgements for the conversation today.
Great. Thanks so much, Cassie. And again, just echoing the sentiment that Cassie has so wonderfully laid out for all of us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Please be as active as you want to in the chat function. This really is a conversation for all of you. And to continue on with the laying the groundwork of what it means to be in community with Food Recovery Network, we like to start off these conversations with a few acknowledgements. And I will say, over the course of the last 2.5 years since we've launched our strategic framework, FRN 10X, our acknowledgements have changed over time to make more space as we've done our own learning, as we've continued on our journey. And this is not only an acknowledgement, but also an encouragement to all of you. I always talk about widening our aperture of understanding and of knowledge. And so for us, with putting equity at the center of how we do our work means that we must take the time and the space to acknowledge the fact that we are on the land of Piscataway Conoy, a modern day tribe here in the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area where Food Recovery Network is headquartered. I as an individual pay rent to the Piscataway Conoy in recognition of the fact that we are on their land that they and their ancestors have inhabited. And this was something that I learned in my continuous learning with a workshop that I attended with Native American leaders and what it feels like for them to have land acknowledgements occur. Hopefully we can make that more and more commonplace, and we encourage you all to check out the website that we have here so that we can all continue our learning about who was here before all of us, and how does that work within our understanding of our present moment. At Food Recovery Network, when we think about centering equity, we are talking about the most vulnerable within our community, within our United States. We believe that Black Lives Matter. We are continued to, sit in pain, with the tragic loss of life within the Black community, and also within the Asian community to stop Asian hate. And part of the evolution of what we are talking about and giving space to this too, that also includes the members of our trans community as well, another group that has been unnecessarily targeted. So wanted to give that space. Many deep breaths to everyone, and I hope that it does, help us to ground why it is that Food Recovery Network is doing the work that we're doing to increase access to food to people who are most in need. So with love and with respect, we will continue to move into the conversation. We had a really big win at the federal level. It was an incredible moment for all of us. So the Food Donation Improvement Act was passed at the end of 2022. It was an effort of mass proportions. Food Recovery Network, we lent our voice to participating in making sure that this piece of legislation moved forward. And you'll see a lot of continued content around what does this mean for all of us in terms of increasing access to communities that need this precious food. How can we make this new federal law come alive? And this is a supplement to an already existing law, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Law. So we're really proud, that we got to see this huge moment occur at the federal level. And we will continue to update our student leaders, our alums all across the US, our other stakeholders, to help people understand that, this is a big part of how food recovery can become the norm and how we can remind ourselves that food has value and it should not be thrown away. Continuing with the grounding, why we're here. What is it that FRN is trying to achieve when we think about our work, when we think about our mission? And we want to recover all that beautiful surplus food to feed everyone who's unnecessarily experiencing hunger in the United States. That's what drives us. And it is part of, as I mentioned earlier, our strategic framework. This is our results count strategic framework. We also call it FRN 10X. How are we expanding the ripple effect of our food recovery work within the strategies that we have down below, 1, 2, 3, that bubbles up to 2 key indicators. We're feeding people today. Our incredible student leaders who are on the call today, thank you all so much for what you do, and for faculty advisors like Fran that we'd already said hi to, but really instrumental in ensuring the health and vitality of our chapters year over year over year, so that we can continue to show up at the commercial and institutional setting to recover that 26 million tons of excess food. That's a lot. That is how we can ensure that people have the food that they deserve today. And then the economic security, the reasons why people don't have the food that they need is because of economic insecurity. What can Food Recovery Network do to ensure, to promote, to maintain economic security for the 34 million people? That's not a number that just sort of happened. This is a result of, we need to secure the economic security for 34 million people who are food insecure through policy change. That's how we make that number 0. And so here we are. We're going to start going through our goals really quickly. So this is always a really interesting time of the year. We're halfway through our program year. We still have the other half to go, and then some. Ensuring the economic security of 34 million people, making sure 26 million tons of food at the commercial institutional setting, that doesn't happen. It's a lot of work, right? And we're going to talk about FRN's unique contribution. Goal number 1 that we'd set out earlier in the year, around August, for those of you who have attended Roundtable Talks before, when we laid out our goals for the year, we said that we were going to recover 2 million pounds of food with the combined efforts of our chapter leaders, with the combined effort of our powerful partnerships and other work that it entails recovering food. So here we are, and we've recovered about 1.6 million pounds of food. So we are almost there. It's really exciting. And we wanted to give a bit of a breakdown of so we're almost there to the 2 million pounds of food. We're super proud of that. And within that, a large part of that 2 million pounds of food goes through our work with our chapters. And so I think I feel like, so if you could go to the pounds recovered slide. No, yes. Not a problem.
Sorry about that.
I just had that a little bit out of order. It's all good data. It really is.
There we go.
But here we are. So not a problem. We just wanted to give you a breakdown of that 1.6 million pounds of food, where that's coming from. And also, when we think about the broader metrics of what that means, these are 1.6 million pounds of food, or excuse me, 1.2 million pounds of food, and the equivalent of what that means in meals and what that means in CO2 diverted when we think about the environmental impacts. So our powerful partnership with FarmLink is one way that we have been able to move a lot of surplus produce off of farm fields. And we're really excited about the fact that our chapters continue to be on pace with their in between going to school, in between determining what their majors are, looking for internships, working, have been able to recover over 200,000 pounds of food all across the United States. And then we have a few other ways. We'll talk more about our Atlanta and Irvine gleaning and food recovery verified as well. But that's our makeup thus far. with how we've been able to recover the 1.2 million pounds of food this program year. And now going back up real quick, it's been really interesting to think about, when I've had my conversations with our student leaders all across the US, how they are feeling with being back on campus. Some students are still doing the hybrid work. The communications that they're getting from their particular administrations, what it means to be in academia. And our students are still managing through that. They're still succeeding through that. And they're still struggling through that, and any number of combinations of that. So we have seen, when we expanded what it meant to be a chapter, that, we're in a different place within the pandemic. The pandemic is still with us. So we are now seeing our student leaders ramping back up with food recovery. But the expansion of what it meant to be a chapter, we added additional ways that our students can be involved, in particular when they had to leave their campus. And we're able to now root into those additional activations. And it's been really fascinating, super encouraging to see that our chapters are still continuing on with food recovery advocacy and community engagement. We have about 88% of our students chapters are engaging in food recovery, and that's up from 79% last year. So, and now nearly half are engaging in one or more tracks of activation. So, even in difficult times, our students are still showing up to support this idea that food is a right, people deserve to have the food today, and working on those activations around policy changes, advocacy changes to ensure people have, that we eradicate hunger from the United States and support a better environment. So wanted to give a few different, updates, to put some of the faces with the work that's happening all across the United States. Again, I'm just so thankful whenever I have direct conversations with our student leaders. And again, a huge thank you to all of you on the call today, taking time off from classes and all the other things that you have going on to be part of this conversation. We are here because of all of you. And thinking about, what this means for us, we're going to continue to have these conversations with our student leaders. And so that means, the different activations that we talked about earlier, the advocacy work will continue, the community engagement will continue, obviously the food recovery will continue, and the different resources that our students might need as we go along that journey. I also just wanted to bubble up for everyone that we are keeping a very close eye on the student loan forgiveness plan put out through the Biden-Harris administration. Why? Well, when we think about who are we centering, the groups, the communities that are most affected by student debt are those, first generation college students. They are the communities that are Black and brown. They are the communities that have not been able to benefit from generational wealth, which is how a lot of people pay for their children to go to college. So we know that when we can, forgive the student loans debt that has occurred, we can reactivate the economy. And so we want to make sure that we have lots of conversations and put out lots of content and all kinds of conversations. I'm learning a lot, of course. So keep an eye out for that. And I wanted to now turn things over to Katie to talk about a really big meaty portion of our updates to all of you. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your responses, your thoughts. So please, please, please continue to ask those questions in the Q&A and tell us your thoughts in the chat. Thank you, Katie.
Great, thank you. And I'll also just say about the student loan forgiveness, that kind of ties into our organizational metrics, which all ties into our strategic framework, which is, again, like FRN spending our time working in partnership with organizations that are also advocating for student loan forgiveness is just one way that we can get at the economic security piece of why, so many people are experiencing hunger. So not only do we care because pretty much our entire staff carries loans. Not only do we care because our main constituency is serving students, we care because this is actually fundamental to the economic security of the 34 million people that we're trying to serve. So I just wanted to tie that back. Because that's also relevant to goal number 2 in expanding our organizational metrics, which is a conversation that we've been having for a while now, because what we're finding in community, much like the strategic framework, it is great to serve people and feed people today, but we need our contribution to community to be broader than food, because the investments needed in community are more than food. So how does FRN play a role in that? So the first thing is that we started tracking things for our own organizational impact. That's more than food. So one of the ways we started tracking that is in the value of volunteer time and just how much time our wonderful network of students put in. And then that is a value to those local economies. And we can actually put a monetary value on that. As we get more into some of our pilot work on Irvine and Atlanta, we'll talk more about the specific metrics that we're tracking in terms of contribution to community. But moving forward, really our commitment is to measure our impact in more than pounds, because we want to contribute to communities more broadly. So what does that mean to contribute to communities? I'll take you back just to ground you for a second. Where when we launched FRN 10X, we said, how do we take this framework and actually prioritize it in the daily work of FRN? How do we take the data and make informed decisions? So our first data dive was done internally here by FRN staff, where we overlay the amount of surplus food that the EPA puts out with the number of people experiencing hunger that Feeding America puts out. And then we overlay that with information on the census and where there are colleges. And what we came up was a map like this, which is in the next slide, which gave us different shading and a general idea of where we should be working in 10 priority states. Where we had the most surplus food and the most people experiencing hunger and the most higher ed institutions. But as we actually put this framework into practice, what we actually found is we needed something far more specific in terms of how we can target our impact. But at that point, it was beyond our internal capabilities. So we were delighted to partner with the Institute of the Environment at the University of Minnesota and a collection of wonderful data scientists there who could actually help us with the technology and the expertise to actually feed in a variety of data sets for us to look at the both supply and demand part of our equation differently. So what you see up here now is kind of the beta of our next version of maps that came from the University of Minnesota. And as you can see, it's far more specific about specific counties. And while we can't show you everything on this slide, what was really particularly special about our partnership with the University of Minnesota was the fact that we could look at the definition of need in a lot of different ways. So for instance, when we started working with the University of Minnesota, what you'll see here is that they were feeding in SNAP benefits as a definition of need. That's different than how Feeding America does it. That's different than what poverty measures. So what we decided was, okay, let's actually start overlaying a bunch of data sets. And what will that tell us? So the next slide is going to bring you out to the United States and kind of the progress on this work so far. So this is a lot. Let me just ground you in what you're looking at. The first thing that you're going to see is an outline, and all of the counties that are currently outlined in this map are those with surplus food that is specifically generated from higher education institutions, since that's where FRN specializes. So this essentially filters out the farmlands and the compost and all of the other things, and specifically just focuses on surplus food that FRN would be in a position to recover. The counties that are highlighted are ones that have SNAP and poverty rates above the national average, and the predominant race or ethnicity is what is the filling, like the fill color of each county. So this was really our first attempt at putting multiple layers of data together to say, okay, where could we actually be working? So if we actually use these particular definitions of SNAP, poverty, surplus food, and where there's higher education institutions developing that surplus food, it is roughly 623 counties that are prime for our intervention, if you will. But as Regina has been saying, like, we really do see it as our work to close racial and ethnic disparities in food access. So we said, okay, what if we actually prioritize communities of color? What does that mean for where we would work? And that's what you see on this next slide. So on the prior slide, we had 623 counties that we could possibly work in. And now we are at 114 counties. So the universe in which we could work went far smaller. And that surprised us. And we said to ourselves, this doesn't totally add up for us, because what we're constantly hearing on the news is about how a family of four can't, basically afford a, one-bedroom apartment everywhere in America. And that got us talking to a lot of specialists and data scientists about what SNAP really measures and what poverty really measures, and started our internal conversations about, is that actually how we would measure need? And surprise, no, not necessarily. So we were delighted to work with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that has a living wage calculator and a living wage database. And that's what you see here. So to ground you, this is every place that is blue on this map is every county that does not earn a living wage. So when you think about what poverty measures or what SNAP measures, it's very discrete. This is the entire universe of people who cannot actually meet their basic needs in terms of food, housing, transportation, medical costs, childcare, etc. And to us, this made so much more sense in terms of how we could possibly start thinking about the universe of where we want to work, because this matches more of our understanding of what we're hearing from the field in terms of where the need truly is. So just to put this in a little bit of context, and then I'll see, what Regina wants to add to, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what this means. But there's roughly 3,300 counties in the United States, and only 68 on average make a living wage. So the majority of counties in the United States cannot afford their basic needs, which is actually pretty striking considering if you just use poverty and SNAP, and particularly, even in communities of color, you were talking about maybe a priority of 600 or so or 100 or so counties, when actually one universe could actually be like roughly 3,200 counties, more than that. So let me stop there for Regina, what you would add. I'm sure there's going to be questions coming into the chat.
I just wanted to breathe in some space to what Katie just walked us through, because this can feel like a lot. When we were going over the data ourselves, I got super teary-eyed about this, because it finally, for some of us, maybe this feels very real and very much known, but it really does butt up against some of these myths that are told to all of us, just our lived experience here in the United States of individualism and pulling yourself up by bootstraps and just making things happen. And yet we know, man, I am struggling. My family is struggling. And so honestly, the struggle is real. It is real. When we think about all the things that we are tasked with affording to support the economy, childcare so that we can go to our jobs, transportation to get to our jobs, to pick up our kids, to get our food. So when you have this overlay of information, it really does begin to tell a completely different kind of picture, and the strata of need definitely widens. And so just again, wanting to give some space and respect and awe to what it is that we're trying to convey to everyone in terms of what the need actually is.
Katie, we did have a question come in through the chat that I wanted to address since we're on this slide. Allison had asked about the total population of people living in poverty as opposed to the median income. And I can share, Allison, that this lighter creamish color, like light blue, according to the US Census and other data sets, is the below 30,000 is the poverty and income, or in terms of income. So you can see this like lighter
30,000 for a family of 4 is
Yes.
determined as poverty. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So you can see that in some places on the map there specifically. Anything else to add there, Katie?
No. What I'll say in terms of what this means for us as we move forward is, at one of the things that we are committed to delivering by the end of this year is a ranking of the 50 states of where we actually think FRN, and for that matter others, could actually be more impactful with our model. So we will be incorporating income in addition to SNAP, in addition to food poverty, in addition to poverty, I think I said that, into our rankings, because we think that provides a more complete picture of need, particularly when you consider how SNAP benefits are administered, differently from state to state. And we think income and the addition of this is really important to paint a more complex and comprehensive picture of where there is true need in the community. Now, the other element of this, again, where FRN specializes, is in higher ed. So how does this all link up to higher ed institutions? So again, taking a minute just to ground you. Again, this is similar to what you've seen before in that all of the outline shows where there's surplus food generated by higher education. The fill is the predominant race or ethnicity there. And all of the counties also have income below the living wage. And what the green dots signify is the presence of a higher education institution. So again, as FRN has traditionally worked in higher education institutions, how does that actually overlay with need and communities of color and supply of surplus food? And that's what this map is starting to tell us. What's interesting on this is that when you actually drill down, as we do for all of the states, what we're actually finding is the higher education institutions are in the communities of both the most need and the most demand, and communities of color, et cetera, tend to be community colleges rather than four-year universities. So what FRN is doing then is, as we think about where we're going to be working and where we want to prioritize our time, we will be taking into account where there are the presence of community colleges in addition to four-year institutions. Because what this state is really telling us is we must figure out a model for community colleges. Like, that is actually the way that we can scale in a meaningful way, utilizing that latent capacity that is already present in communities. So that's one layer that we're working on. The next thing that I'm going to say about this data and what we're working on next, so this is going to be a topic of a lot of conversation in the coming months, is about how we prioritize communities of color when we are talking about replication and our expansion. Because as we're diving into the data, we're running into, not surprisingly, a lot of historical systemic racism in terms of redlining and where institutions are founded or not founded and how that overlays with race. And that's a really complex conversation that we want to make sure we give a lot of space to. But as we continue to center equity in our work, this is going to be the next big nugget that we are going to be working through with our communities of stakeholders. And when you join us, hopefully again in August, we will have a more robust conversation about that. So in terms of next steps, this is the next big thing that we're focusing on moving forward. So with that, I will stop to see, Regina, if there's anything that you would add, and if not, then to bring us on to the next goal.
Only to iterate, this is complex. There needs to be a lot of space. Please, continue to be with us in community. We're not soundbite people. This is really, we want to be as transparent as possible. We have these roundtable talks so that you can infuse your thoughts. And so thank you to everyone who's doing that thus far. But please also encourage other people to be part of this conversation and be part of our work. We were able to get to where we're at with the maps because of a lot of amazing thought partnership. So wanted to just say that, and also to say we are of course running a little late because a little long, because we are not soundbite people, but I will pick up the pace a little bit. But please know that if you have questions, you can always reach out to us, and we have tons of content on our website and on our social media. So there's lots of ways to continue the on-ramp of understanding the work of Food Recovery Network, especially for those of you where this might be your very first roundtable. So our next goal that we had set out for this program year was to recruit 20 to 30 new chapters, and half of those being in our original 10 target states. And those are the states that we had identified with the highest rates of food insecurity and would be surplus food. And so here we are, halfway through the program year, and we're really proud to say that we welcomed in 17 new chapters. So thank you to these new chapters. We love you, and we are so grateful to have you within the network and cannot wait to learn from you. And 5 of those new chapters are in our target states. So we still have about 6 more months left in the program year. So we're hoping to add on some new, continue to add on new chapters. And of course, we'll have the ask at the end of this, but for those of you that have connections to schools that might not have an FRN chapter, we're going to say it many, many times, please do, make those warm introductions for us. And, our call to action is, introduce people to our social media. That's a really great way to get to know us, so you don't have to jump into the deep end of the pool. Even though if you do, we're really welcoming, so no matter where you jump into the pool, we want you to feel involved. So, if you can do that for us, more schools that have FRN chapters means more food getting into the communities that need it most. So thank you in advance for that. And then goal 4, to create that deeper connection with our incredible student leaders and our stakeholders. And we wanted to do that throughout the year by convening student town halls. We have a bunch of gleaning initiatives, the community college outreach that Katie alluded to and indicated, and to continue doing what we do best, which is recovering surplus food. And so there's a lot that has been happening. You can go to our website and you can see many of the conversations that we've had thus far this program year. We've activated our alums. I know many of you are on the conversation today about advocacy and figuring out the right on-ramps for our student leaders. Where do they want to be involved? What are they experiencing right now? Through our town halls, we're able to determine all of that and find out the best ways to help our students as they navigate through this continued pandemic world, this new world that we're all living in. There's no going back to how things were before. What was happening before the pandemic can look very different in a lot of ways. And we want to make sure that we are authentically building relationships with all of you, listening in, student leaders, that we're building with you in the ways that make sense for you, in the many, many different ways that, you live your lives, you have so much going on. But be on the lookout for continued conversations for our student leaders, our alums, and our other stakeholders too. So I'll keep this really brief. We have a few different pilots that we wanted to like update everybody on. But before I do, I did want to kick it back over to Katie really quickly, who's been very steeped into this work about some of the insights that we have on the pilots that we've been running for the past year and a half.
Thanks. So a couple of things. First, I just wanted to call back to, again, goal 2 and expanding organizational metrics. This is another example of organizational metrics that we're tracking internally and really as a pilot for what would it mean for us to track them across the organization as a whole. So how we can paint a more complete picture of our impact broader than pounds. So what does that mean in terms of partnerships? What does that mean in terms of financial contributions back to the community? The really important thing that I want to say about Atlanta here is we've been working in Atlanta for, it's going to be about 2 years now. And we've been running a series of pilots around, how we can feed more people faster. And what would it mean to actually create like a marketplace for surplus food? And what's super interesting is now after 18 months, we've actually think that we have found a quote unquote marketplace for one piece of the puzzle. And I just offer that in terms of how long it takes to authentically partner with community. So essentially, after a number of conversations, we are now partnering with the Atlanta Department of Education, where we are hosting, we started hosting just one pop-up market a week at a Title I school, as identified by the Atlanta Department of Education as a neighborhood school that has trouble with food access. And we did this for about 6 weeks in the fall. And as we were winding down that work, we had 3 other schools come to us and say, this sounds so perfect. Would you consider doing it at my school as well? And this is the exact, kind of recipe, if you will, we were looking for, in the sense of we are feeding more people who need it faster using existing infrastructure. We pay the farmers for the surplus produce that then is used in the markets, and our neighboring chapters, our chapter leaders, come to that market and help us run the market. And it's been a great success story. So following into the spring, we're actually going to be replicating at 4 different elementary schools and helping start some community fridge programs there. So we're super excited about this work, and it's just a really excellent testament to how long it can take to find something. But once you do, you can really see that demand very quickly.
I wanted to, in particular, with the work in Atlanta, 18 months, identifying sometimes the farmer, that's the easy part. Getting the attention of a farmer is another thing. Building an authentic relationship with a farmer is a total other thing after that. And so these things do take a little while. And, working with the local city government, working, when we first started there with EPA federal, has really allowed a lot of really fascinating learning for us about how to support the communities in the ways that they want to be supported, as Katie was saying. And in particular, we also wanted to say thank you to Kroger, to Whole Foods Market, and to the Homestead Foundation to help support us being in Atlanta when things, at first took a little bit longer than we were anticipating. When the learning was just literally drinking from a fire hose. And so here we are now, 18 months later, at a place where we can support the community in the ways that they, need from us. So wanted to continue on with our pilots. So we replicated what we learned in Atlanta, took all the learnings, and supported starting a pilot in Irvine. And I see that, Katie, you've taken your mic off, so I want your voice in this as soon as we can. Yes.
So very quickly, again, just another example of kind of a diversification of metrics. What I think was really different about Irvine versus California is California has such a robust growing season and already a lot of infrastructure in terms of organizations that deal with surplus food, with feeding people experiencing hunger. the really interesting thing about Irvine is that it was actually a lot about social norms and us coming in understanding the social norms to help us really have an impact in this community. So for example, when people were talking about where surplus food is and where the food needed to go, and of course everybody on this call who's from California is going to be like, this isn't the right transportation analogy, but nonetheless, people would say, well, nobody drives from east to west. That's insane. That will just take you 4 hours. Like, we're not going to bring the food that far. And we said as an intervention, well, what if we pay you $17 an hour for you to actually transport it where it needs to go? Well, that created enough of a market incentive for people to say, oh, then that's no problem. And so that is a really great example also of FRN working in community, where we were complementing the infrastructure that was already there and providing an incentive to build something else. So all of those wonderful organizations are still doing wonderful work. We were able just to come in and be additive to it.
Thank you for that, Katie. It's again, you can see what we learned in Atlanta, how we learned in Irvine helps us to strengthen our toolbox as we think through the mapping work where FRN should be, to authentically support communities in the ways that they want from us. And I also just wanted to acknowledge with love, Susan, thank you for sharing that with us in the chat. It can really, sometimes, you know, I'm just thinking about, a lot of times people want these large scale, like moving millions and millions of pounds of food in a day. And yeah, sometimes that can happen. And sometimes to really get food where it is needed the most, it means making those phone calls. It means that painstaking relationship building, and that meal, those meals that we're able to get to those little kids in their elementary school community, that matters. So in all of the different complexities and methods, you know, it's really important that we continue to share this learning, and Susan, and sometimes, you know, sharing the hardship as well. So thank you for that. Continuing on, one other area that I wanted to just highlight really quickly was our large scale events. So we were again at the Super Bowl this year for the 3rd year in a row. This year it was in Glendale, Arizona. I learned a lot about Arizona. I am really proud to say, you know, I posted, I published an op-ed in the Arizona Central about our work at Food Recovery Network and about the scale of, you know, the individuals who are suffering from food insecurity in Arizona, and why recovering from large-scale events like the Super Bowl are so critical. And so we were thankful for the Bullseye Event Group for bringing us on. A lot of eyes on FRN during this tailgate party event. So we weren't in the stadium, we were right outside of the stadium. We could see State Farm Stadium. And we were able to recover almost 3,000 pounds of food. So we can see what that looks like in actual meals donated, and how much metric tons of CO2 was prevented when we didn't throw away that precious food. But as Katie had mentioned, you know, thinking about the other ways that FRN is contributing to the communities in which we work, and how recovering food has these beautiful other effects, the financial resources put back into the community, and what it meant to have, again, Fran and you know, our incredible students at Northern Arizona University. Your time has value, just like this food has value. So we want to continue doing these large scale events to get more eyes on the fact that food recovery should be the norm, and it can be the norm. Just get in touch with us. So all of you listening in, if you have a conference coming up, even if you don't have a corporate cafeteria, that's okay. If you have a conference on or off the field, you know, with your work, let us know. We want to, and what this means for us, we're going to continue to look for opportunities to connect with our students and our stakeholders. We will say, you know, having paid opportunities for our students to recover when they go above and beyond what they're doing on their with their chapters. A lot of our students themselves are working. You know, we didn't even get into, you know, the true face of what it looks like to be a college student in the United States. Yes, there's a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds, but there's a lot of folks who have families that are a little bit older. And so time is different when we think about being able to volunteer. So offering up more of those paid and living wage paid opportunities to help us get more of these recoveries happening. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to invest in our students by providing these resources, listening spaces through those town halls, and other topic-specific webinars. So all of the student leaders and alums listening in, let us know. You can see on the website all the different topics that we've covered thus far, but let us know if there are things that you want to have a specific webinar about.
Thank you so much, Regina. I'm going to transition us now to the Q&A portion. I know a lot percolating, so much data, so many learnings. We had a couple of questions come in that I wanted to bubble up, but definitely keep any questions coming. And if we can't address them here, we'll definitely feel free to connect with us in the future. Allison, I know you had a really great question about how we can utilize this data. I'm assuming you're talking about specifically the maps to encourage more funding opportunities for pantries and shelters that receive and redistribute recovered food, particularly in partnering with health, public safety institutions and other well-funded groups. Yes, we've talked about this a lot, and knowing that the maps are a really key tool for many other organizations in this work. That's a big reason why we want to be so transparent in what we're learning, and not only sharing with other organizations such as ours that are prioritizing their work in certain communities, as well as organizations that are already in these communities, to be able to show the value that their programs have, as well as funders in identifying where can you direct more funds into these areas that are oftentimes underserved. And so, yes. Regina, anything else to add there?
Only wanted to add, thank you so much for that. For anyone listening in, we are available to have, lunch and learns. If your company wants to bring us in to learn more about FRN and how we show up in your particular community, whether or not you have one location or several, those are opportunities that we welcome, because it does allow us to be in community and talk more about how our work can work in tandem with wherever you are in the US. So I just wanted to offer that as well.
Thank you. We had another question come in from Leslie asking if FRN ever partners with government entities or grant programs. And I wanted to add specifically for our Atlanta and Irvine work, we worked, yes, with local governments. With Atlanta, we worked with the Office of Resilience as a part of the city, again, to identify those specific areas within the city that had opportunities where where FRN and other food rescue groups needed to be to serve those groups, as well as in Irvine. Katie or Regina, anything else to add there?
We continue to look for opportunities, so we're having a lot of really great conversations with local officials. I mean, even Mayor Weirs at Glendale, Arizona was with us, during the Super Bowl recovery. So, whenever we can, because, thinking about policy changes, that's where elected officials, that's where government really comes in. And we want to be that on the ground example, no matter what community we're talking about, local, state, federal, we all have an opportunity to do the right thing with our surplus food and help the environment.
Great, thank you. So now I'm going to move us to closing out for our time here today. Again, keep the questions coming. This is not the last time we'll talk about all of this great work. Definitely looking forward to more thoughts and reactions as we dive in deeper. To provide folks with some action opportunities at the end of our call, I wanted to just present just a few ways that you can get involved further with Food Recovery Network. One way is to donate to support our work, donating funds, whether it's one time, monthly, or as Regina said, partnering with your corporate group or other grant opportunities. Definitely welcome the support to continue to drive our movement forward. To stay up to date with our work, you can definitely sign up for our newsletter. I know Kimmy will send some things in the chat, or follow us on social media. We'll have a few virtual volunteer opportunities, and April is a part of Earth Month and Stop Food Waste Day. So that's a really great way just to have some fun, learn more about farms across the US that have opportunities for recovering surplus food, and connect with other folks that are interested and engaged in this work. And as we said as well, telling a friend about Food Recovery Network, inviting FRN to your companies to have lunch and learns, inviting us to join us for recovering surplus food from your events, and just other ways just to be able to engage in the food recovery movement. With that, I'll pass it to you, Regina, with any last final thoughts.
A huge thank you to your time, an unrenewable resource. Thank you for spending this hour with us. We look forward to being in touch in any ways that you want to be in touch with us. We're here, and we look forward to the next conversation and all the wonderful work that happens in between. And again, thank you to all of our student leaders listening in. Thank you to our funders who help support this work. It would not be possible without you. Thank you to our board members. Tina, thank you for joining us. And I am just really excited about what this conversation means for FRN. So thank you all so much.
Great, thank you all. Wishing you well on the rest of your Wednesdays. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Be well.